Good evening. Welcome to the Virtual Parlor Chat from the Morris-Jumel Mansion. My name is Catherine Hughes. I am the Executive Director of the Mansion, and I welcome you to this evening's Parlor Chat, which is focusing on the exterior restoration and accessibility project. This is part 2 of a public forum for us to share the updates on what is happening with the project, as well as allowing you to be able to ask us any questions. We have panelists this evening who will cover all aspects of the project. So we have Wayne Benjamin from the Morris-Jumel Board of Trustees. He is the Vice President. We have the esteemed Council Member Carmen De La Rosa, and we also have the Senator Robert Jackson, who will share with you the support that they have given, allowing us to get to the point we have. And then we will have Danielle Monopoly, who is the project manager from the Historic House Trust of New York City, as well as the architectural firm Ayers Cowley Architects. We will have the project architect speaking. That's Eric D. Franzo. And then you will have the opportunity to use the Q&A function with the chat so that you can ask us any questions. You can put them in at any time, but we will be offering people the opportunity to do that throughout and then waiting until everyone has spoken in order to get to those questions. We will also be joined by Meredith Soren. She will be an additional panelist who can answer questions as well at the end. Tonight's entire virtual parlor chat will be from now until 8:30 this evening. We do virtual parlor chats every third Wednesday and of the month on all different topics, and these are recorded and then they are put onto the Morris-Jumel Mansion's YouTube page, so you can check those out anytime. And now I'd like to share a few things as I welcome you to this evening. So as I've said, we've got current information coming from all aspects of the project, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Next. We have upcoming events at Morris-Jumel Mansion. This month, we have a concert at the end of the month. This is the last Saturday, part of the Harlem Culture Crawl. And it is a concert from, it's the Harlem Chamber Players playing the music of Harlem Renaissance composers. This is a free event. It begins at 3 o'clock in the park, so please do join us. Grab your chair, your folding chair, and come on down to the Morris-Jumel Mansion. We also have happening on May 11th, the Family and Community Day. So that will be May 11th from 1 to 3. Please join us for that as well. Next. Finally, let me also invite you to the George Washington Dinner. This is our annual fundraiser, and this year it will be on July 4th from 6 to 9 p.m. And we have a French theme honoring the fact that we are on Bastille Day on July 14th. And so we invite you to buy tickets and join us for that annual fundraiser. Next. We want to share a little bit about the historical significance of the Morris-Jumel Mansion. For anyone who might not know, we have the oldest surviving residence in Manhattan that was once part of a 130-acre estate, covering quite a bit of Upper Manhattan from river to river. It was built in 1765 for the Morris family, and it served as the headquarters for George Washington during the Battle of Harlem Heights. Then later, it was the home of Eliza Jamel, a colorful character who eventually married Aaron Burr later in life. And then finally, more recent history, Lin-Manuel Miranda used the house as a spot where he could commune with Aaron Burr's spirit, and he wrote some of the music from his musical Hamilton there. Thank you. Next slide. Architecturally, the house is significant. As you see in this picture, the double height portico and triangular pediment in the front is supported by Tuscan columns. And that was considered innovative design at the time that it was built. This is a New York City landmark designated in 1967. It was also a National Historic Landmark declared in 1961. So now I want to introduce our first speaker. Wayne Benjamin, as I said, is Vice President of the Morris-Jumel Board of Trustees. Wayne?
Thank you, Catherine. Let me turn my camera on. Next slide, please. So I want to extend my welcome to everyone as well. As Catherine mentioned, this is the second in a series of public forums on the Morris-Jumel Mansion's exterior restoration and accessibility project. The first program was held in December of 2023, and that provided extensive background on the goals and phasing for the project, the funds that were secured over the course of a decade, and provided some initial information on what the project schedule is anticipated to be. If you missed that program, it was recorded, and you can access it through a link that is posted to Morris-Jumel's website. Next slide, please. So since that December program, there are a number of interesting things that have happened. Manhattan Community Board 12 adopted a resolution supporting the preservation and maintenance of the mansion. And of course, we thank them for that show of support. The project architect has completed 80% of the design and construction documents for phase 1 of the project, which we'll talk a little bit more about tonight. In addition to that, the Historic House Trust and the project architect have worked to further define the scope of work that will be included in the second phase of this project. And additionally, Assemblyman Taylor allocated funds to support the interior upgrade of the mansion's electrical system. So in addition to restoring the outside and making it accessible, we'll be able to bring the electrical systems into the 21st century. And we thank him very much for that as well. Next slide, please. As we discussed in December, the mansion is owned by the city of New York, which is something that many people don't realize. It is not a property that is owned by the Morris-Jumel Mansion, Inc. It's owned by the city of New York under the jurisdiction of the New York City Parks Department. Parks is responsible generally for the maintenance and restoration of the building and also maintains its mechanical systems. It is operated as a historic house and museum by Morris-Jumel Mansion, Inc., which is a private nonprofit entity. Next slide, please. So we at the Morris-Jumel Mansion, Inc. are responsible for the exhibits, the events, the interpretation. It's for everything that is part of making the mansion a living historic house and museum. It is a member of the New York City Historic House Trust, which is a nonprofit formed in 1989 to preserve the 23 historic houses that are located in New York City Parks. And we also have the distinction of being one of the few historic houses that is accredited by the American Alliance of Museums. Next slide, please. This project is important and exciting. It is, in fact, the first major exterior restoration of the mansion since 1990, and that is more than a quarter of a century ago. This project will include an extensive restoration of the building enclosure, which is the walls, the windows, the roofs, also repairing architectural details. And as you can see in this photo, there's waterproofing that must be done. And this project, I think, particularly in the second phase, will address the scope of work required to waterproof the basement. In addition to restoring the mansion, it will become accessible for the first time in its nearly 260-year history. So we'll be installing a ramp at the east entrance, and also the restrooms will be renovated. So one of them will in fact be ADA compliant. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, what we're seeking to achieve with this project is to return the mansion's exterior to a condition that is befitting its status as a national and a city landmark. As Katherine pointed out, it was designated a national landmark in the early 60s. It was designated a city landmark later in the 60s, and the interior was also designated as a landmark in, I believe, the 1970s. As you can imagine, restoring a nearly 260-year-old historic wood building is challenging. It is a challenging and unique both architectural and construction undertaking. So as part of this presentation, our project architect, Ayers Cowley Architects, will provide an overview of the insights on both the design approach and some of the lessons learned as they, investigated existing conditions and, put together the design and construction documents to advance the project. Next slide, please. This project is managed by the Historic House Trust, and it coordinates with the New York City Parks Department and all the processes that are involved in advancing a project through the city's approval process. Morris-Jumel Mansion, although we are not responsible for managing this capital project, we do coordinate with HHT and with New York City Parks to champion and advocate for advancing the project, and we have done so, for more than a decade. The project will proceed in 2 phases. The first phase was actually put out to bid at the end of January, and initial bids were submitted actually just last Friday. HHT will discuss more about that in this presentation, as well as the status of contract award and what we anticipate in terms of the beginning of the construction process this summer. Next slide, please. The project is substantially funded, but to be clear, it is not fully funded. The total project cost that we were looking at in 2023 had an estimate of over $9 million. So Morris-Jumel Mansion Inc. has successfully secured $8.5 million in public capital funds over the past decade, but $8.5 million is not $9 million. And as we know, costs are increasing. So we have requested more than $1 million in additional capital from Council Member De La Rosa and Borough President Mark Levine in the current city budget that's being negotiated, and we have our fingers crossed that we will secure those funds. Next slide, please. As we shared with you in December and will reiterate continually, our elected officials have played a vital role in advancing this project, and their continued support is simply essential if we are to succeed. Since 2015, capital funds were allocated for a number of public sources, including the mayor's office, the city council, the borough president, the state senate, and the state assembly. And tonight we are honored to be joined by 2 of our supporters. We will be having comments from Council Member Carmen Delarosa, followed by comments from State Senator Robert Jackson, who will, share with us, why they support the mansion and this exterior restoration project, and any other thoughts they have on how collectively we can help move this forward. With that, I hand the presentation over to our Council Member Carmen Delarosa.
And actually, we are going to let Carmen De La Rosa come at the end of our virtual parlor chat this evening. She has another event that she is at, and so we want to give her time to be able to come on to the virtual parlor chat. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Senator Robert Jackson, who we are very happy to have joining us this evening. Senator?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this chat. And in fact, I'm so happy to be here because obviously I was not at the previous one. And even though I've been involved in coming to the House for many years as someone that has lived in Northern Manhattan since 1977, and being a member of the City Council for 12 years, and now I'm State Senator representing the 31st Senatorial District, which includes from 155th Street North, all of Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill, and 1/3 of my district is in the Northwest Bronx. And let me say this to you, that if you want to know the beauty of this house, what you have to do is just come and experience it. Walk inside and look at it, and look at the furniture, and look at the design of it. I tell you, this was, as you said at that time, this was an amazing land trust that was opened up to the community. And in fact, as you know, part of the other areas in the city of New York, you have the Dyckman farmhouse right up there on 204th Street, another valuable testament of the type of people that lived here and the type of houses that we lived in during that period of time. And so I'm just happy to be here, knowing that you, the trustees, are doing a great job in trying to make this house like it looked when it was first opened up, beautiful. And we have our, we have work to do, but with people like you, Wayne, and Catherine, and everyone else, and the architect, let me just say that this is so important for not only Washington Heights Inwood, not only New York City, but for the entire country and world. Because we get people from all over the world to come here that want to experience this, the oldest wood house in the city of New York, in Manhattan rather. And the type of furniture that exists inside, and all of the designs and the living rooms and stuff like that. So it's a beautiful house, and quite frankly, Wayne, you have been an inspiration for me going back. And I say that when you're asked me as a state senator, can I contribute some funds in order to help to rehab the house, I was happily pleased to allocate $500,000 in funds. And I've committed to you, even before we begin this evening, if you need more, I will try to allocate more capital funding, along with my colleagues Carmen Delarosa and Borough President Mark Levine and Assemblymember Al Taylor, and anyone else that wants to contribute in order to, let's get this beautiful home how it looked when it first opened up. And so that's my commitment to working with you as a team in order to get the funding that you need in order to carry out the rehabilitation that's necessary, so that everyone can see it how it really is. And that's what my commitment is to all of you. So with that, I say thank you for inviting me. I'm going to listen to the presentation and see what type of questions come up from the members of our communities that are Zooming in and listening. And I'm going to try to juggle some paperwork on my desk while I'm doing that. So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. We appreciate your support. And as well as being an attraction for people from all over the world, the Morris-Jumel Mansion is also something for the community to be proud of. They are the ones that we're really reaching out to, and we want to be that cultural anchor in Washington Heights and Harlem. So that is really as well a part of what the Morris-Jumel Mansion is all about. And next up, we have Danielle Monopoly. Danielle is the project manager for the entire thing. A big job, and she is with the Historic House Trust of New York City. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Catherine. Next slide, please. As Catherine said, my name is Danielle Monopoly. I'm an architectural conservator with the Historic House Trust. Apologies for the date. It seems it just won't edit to April 2024. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the Historic House Trust. Wayne did briefly mention earlier, we are a nonprofit partnered with the New York City Parks Department that advocates for, promotes, and provides expertise to preserve 23 publicly owned historic sites located throughout all 5 boroughs, as you can see on the map to the left. Next slide. This includes the Morris-Jumel Mansion, and we'll in particular be speaking about the capital project I'm managing currently, the accessibility updates and reconstruction project. Next slide, please. So some of the scope for the first stage, it includes a full exterior restoration, including roof replacement of windows. We will be replacing all of the columns at the south porch, some interior plaster repairs, and accessibility updates, as Wayne has previously stated. Next slide, please. At the end of January, we did release a request for proposals to contractors in the New York City area. Next slide, please. Sorry, one moment. Over this time, we have met with and spoken with several qualified contractors and are in the process of working with them to ensure that we have the best project within budget. As we finalize the design over the next few weeks, we will continue to negotiate their bids to work towards contract award and construction procurement. Next slide, please. And here is just to illustrate the approximate location of the construction fence around the Morris-Jumel Mansion. Details will be finalized over the next few weeks. We can see some sort of bump outs to the left and right. Those will be staging areas for the contractor to use during the restoration. But as you can see, so this shows the paths that will be impacted, but in large, the park will be open to the public. Next slide, please. And just some more slides on the accessibility plan. So we see the proposed ramp at the east side of the house and the alterations to the brick path along the east side of the house. Next slide. And the renderings that were provided to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, which were approved. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to provide some information on what can be expected throughout construction. We intend to keep the museum open to the public as much as possible. The perimeter of the house will be fenced. Anytime the park will need to be closed, we will ensure that this is this information is provided to the public. It will be available on social media, site signs, the Parks Department website. Construction hours are generally starting between 7 and 8 a.m. and ending between 3 and 4 p.m. And you will see more activity in the warmer months. Next slide, please. And this is just how you can help bring awareness. I won't go through all these points, but it will be available for you to go through once the video is posted to the Morris-Jumel's YouTube page. And I think that is it for now. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Danielle, for that. We do have Carmen De La Rosa, I think, on. And so, Carmen, I see you waving hello.
Hi.
So we're going to jump to Carmen, and then we will hear from Ayers Cowley Architects. Okay, so go right ahead, Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Wayne, and all of the board members of the Morris-Jumel Mansion. I apologize for being late. I'm coming from a housing town hall that's very important for our community as well. And I'm excited to be here and to be talking about the vision for the future of the Morris-Jumel Mansion. I understand the historic importance of the mansion for our community and our collective responsibility to ensure that the mansion is not only a safe and secure place for our community to meet, but also a place that keeps the historic content of our community alive. And so I am proud to report that we've been able to secure funding for the mansion's exterior restorations and accessibility projects as part of phase 1 of this project at $2.3 million. This year, we are advocating to secure $750,000 needed for the further reconstruction and repairs such as the retaining wall, the brick pathways, waterproofing of the building, landscaping, and so much more. We obviously are in the thick of budget negotiations, as are our colleagues on the state level. But I want to assure everyone that this is a priority for me, for our office, and for our community. And so we are marching ahead with securing the funding that's needed to bring this project to completion. In addition to that, we will also be allocating from our member capital funds an additional $175,000 for historic lighting along the historic district, which includes the areas of West 162nd Street to West 163rd Street, from St. Nicholas Avenue to Edgecombe and Jumel Place. And so I know this has been an outstanding issue for our community that was begun by my predecessor in the council. And we're hoping that with this additional allocation of $175,000, we will also bring this project to completion as well. And so we are targeting our resources to this area of the community. We are grateful for our partners at the Historic House Trust, as well as our partners at the Parks Department for the collaboration in getting this done. It truly takes a village to look out for our most adored and beloved historic mansions in our community. We are lucky to have the Morris-Jumel Mansion in our district, as well as the Dyckman Farmhouse. And, understanding the constraints that exist for the funding of these historic houses, we are committed to continuing the fight in this budget season to make sure the funding is there. And I always like to leave the community with a call to action. The first call to action is that the preliminary budget hearings for the city council are beginning after May 1st, when the executive budget hearings, when the executive budget is going to be released by the mayor. When the Parks Department committee hearing is scheduled, I will make sure to let you all know, because it would be great if you could testify on the importance of the historic houses and the need to ensure that we have adequate funding for the houses, as well as getting involved in the conversations that are continuing to take place, whether they be at Community Board 12 or in the City Council during the budget process. There's actions and rally. So please do sign up for our e-newsletter if you haven't already. Follow us on social media for additional updates as well. And I want to thank the leadership once again of the Morris-Jumel Mansion for having me tonight. Excuse my tardiness, and I'm looking forward to a big win for Morris-Jumel Mansion in this budget. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Council Member De La Rosa. We really do appreciate everything that you have been able to provide in terms of support. It has been crucial. And so we thank you for being here tonight. Now we are going to move on and hear some of the nitty-gritty about what has happened with the investigation so far. And so I want to introduce Eric DeFranzo. He is the project architect, and he will be joined by Paige Ayers Cowley, who is the principal architect of PACA. Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next slide, please. So we thought it might be interesting to give some insight into what we've sort of been up to over the past several months, and show some information related to our process for assessing the conditions of the mansion, and determining what the needs are, the scope of work for the project. So you can see here in these two slides, our team spent over the course of a couple of weeks, spent a good deal of time up on this lift around the entire perimeter of the building, inside and out, accessing basically every square inch of the mansion, investigating the conditions to determine, the extent of deterioration in certain areas, and doing some analysis on some of the materials, and really getting our hands dirty so we can find out what was the most important aspects of the restoration project, and develop our documents for the construction project. Next slide, please. And this is one of the photos taken while we were doing the exterior assessment up on the lift, sort of giving you a bird's eye view. We were really trying to focus on getting a good look at some of the conditions around the roof. You can see here at the base of one of the chimneys, some of the flashing details there, to get a sense of where there's some issues with water infiltration, and develop our details for restoration in those areas. Next slide, please. And again, here, some additional photos up high on the lift. On the left, you're looking out towards the north over the octagon wing. We really wanted to see where all the different slopes of the roofs converge, have a look at the conditions of the shingles in these areas, and the metal flashings. And then on the right, you can see we wanted to get up close and see some of the decorative elements on the exterior. This allowed us to get really close, take measurements that we needed, sound out some of the wood finishes here to see if what is the extent of deterioration there, what needs to be replaced, what can be restored, what can be preserved. Next slide, please. Again, here on the left, we're up at close to one of the dormer windows here. So we wanted to get a sense of not only accessing all the windows from the interior, but getting up close to the exterior is very important for us to be able to determine how we're going to tackle restoration of these windows. And again, looking at where the different sections of the roof all meet, and seeing those conditions up close. On the right, that's a detail of support posts that's in place for the railings that were once up on the roof. So we got up close with these, and we've determined that these are going to be useful for us. We're going to be reusing these when we replicate the roof railings and install the new railings up on the roof here. Next slide, please. This is just an example of some of the work we've been doing. We conducted a probe investigation, doing some selective removals in certain areas. On the left, you can see we identified a section of the exterior siding that is showing some signs of deterioration. So we did some selective removals in this location to try to get an idea of what's going on behind the surface. Is this just a cosmetic condition, or has there been some water damage that's a little bit more widespread? So we've done some investigations like this in several locations to really get a sense of what's going on behind the surface and help us develop our details for the project. Next slide, please. Again, here, this is one of the side entrance porches. We wanted to get access to some of the structural conditions, see what's happening there. This is in the area, I believe, on the west porch, which we're going to be restoring. We also did an investigation on the east side, which is where the reconstruction is going to be happening for accessibility. Next slide, please. And these images show we extracted some samples in several locations to do laboratory analysis to identify the species of wood that's used everywhere, because we know that our first goal is to try to figure out how much of the existing historic fabric can be salvaged and restored. But inevitably there's certain areas that will need to be replicated. So we wanted to make sure that we're doing a faithful restoration and we're utilizing the same wood species as the existing or historic condition. So we did this throughout the building and analyzed several samples to identify the historic materials. So on the left, you're looking at the balcony and the front. We lifted up some floorboards to try to get a sense of structural support in those areas. In the center, that's a wood sample that was taken from one of the windowsills. And then on the right, a similar type of sample at the portico, front porch columns. Next slide, please. And we spent a good deal of time crawling around in the attic crawl spaces to see the structural framing of the roof, get a sense of the condition of the roof decking boards. So this is, I believe, in the roof that's over the front portico, over the front porch. And you know, we've accessed several of these locations, and this was very helpful in informing the scope of work and some of the detailing for the roof replacement. Next slide, please. And this is our structural engineering team doing some analysis on the columns. What they're doing there is called a resistograph test, where they're drilling holes in the wood to measure the structural integrity of the wood. And then on the right is the results of their analysis. So this sort of forensic investigation allows them to determine the structural integrity of the existing materials that are remaining, and then overall just helps inform the project in terms of restoration versus replication. Next slide, please. And then finally, just an excerpt of some of the detailing that we've developed as a result of all of this investigation and analysis. These are two of the details that are in the construction document set that was issued for bid. And as Danielle mentioned, we are nearing completion on this construction documents package this month. And that's what we have.
Thank you so much, Eric,
Thank
for the sort of deep dive really into the project and the work that people can't see, you know, behind the scenes. They don't know that you're crawling in the crawl spaces.
Yeah.
And so it's really good to know that that is part of the project.
Right.
So we're going to bring Meredith Horsford in as one of our panelists. And so at this point, what we can do is just share. We don't need to have the slides. We can have just our talking heads. And then people can ask us questions on the Q&A function. I will say that we have a couple of people asking, when is the actual work expected to begin and end? And I think it's kind of interesting to say, when is the actual work beginning? What I believe people you know, always want to know is, when will they see something you know, happening? And so can we give them a little bit more detail on that, Danielle?
I'm happy to jump in, Catherine, and Danielle, feel free to jump in
Oh,
if you'd
sure.
like.
Go ahead, Meredith.
Well, I think our primary issue here, primary thought, is that we really want to focus on making sure that we engage the right contractor who has the right experience to do this work, because as we all know, it's really specialized work and it's a really important project. So I think, you know, we can't give you a specific date as of yet until we've actually finalized a cost with a contractor and have them on board. So we're happy to let you know once that happens.
Okay. So do we want to give people a ballpark? We've been talking about the summer as sort of our goal. Are we still in that ballpark?
I think we're still in that ballpark, but again, we'll, as soon as we know more, we're happy to share that information.
Okay, great. And so let me get to the questions. Well, in addition to that, people are asking how long we are estimating it to take. And again, that's going to be, I know, very ballpark, but can we give a little bit more on that?
Sure. So I think that definitely phase one we know is projected to be about 2 years of construction. And phase two, once we get to that, we'll have a better idea of what that time frame looks like for the length of time on construction.
Okay, so we have the question, how will programs continue during the construction? Great question. I can answer some of that. We're going to adapt. So we don't want to, we're not going to shut down except for very particular moments in time. And something like Jazz at the Mansion, a beloved program that's been happening for over 30 years. We're going to continue to offer that as long as our amazing Marjorie Elliott will play with Parlor Entertainment. And so we will adapt and do that on the North Lawn instead of on the patio. We're going to find ways to make things work by adapting around the site. It will be a little different, but we do want to continue to offer people the same programming that we currently do. Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say, the Historic House Trust and the Parks Department will continue working very closely with the Morris-Jumel Mansion on the construction schedule to work, with your programming.
And as well with just the everyday access to the park. And I know, we don't want to shut those gates any more than we might have to for safety's sake. When something, if we have a boom coming over the walkways, we don't want people underneath that. So it'll just be really for people's safety.
Yep.
Okay. And while this much needed restoration will bring the house back to its glory, how are the pathways, grounds, and parks also going to improve? Do you want to take that one, Danielle or Meredith?
I'm happy to hop in. And again, Danielle, jump on in. So there are some areas where the pathways are going to be reworked, and then there are some areas where they will not. There's simply not enough funding in the project to manage. You've got quite a lot of walkways in Roger Morris Park. So this is an instance where the areas that are not being redone, if there's any engagement through private donations, that would be amazing for that kind of work to happen. We're also, have a great relationship with the park administrator. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to talk to folks about how they can also kind of get engaged and support the park.
Can you speak to a little bit more about the actual, the bushes, the trees, the various parts of the park?
So there's not landscape work slated in phase one, because if we did it in phase one, then it'll just get ruined when we go to do the work on phase two. So the landscape work will happen in phase two.
Okay.
And let me also just add, sort of building on Councilmember De La Rosa's call to action. This project is really focused on the restoration of the mansion, which sits in a park. And in terms of the stakeholders for the mansion and the park, there's advocacy that is needed for the things that we're talking about now to improve the park. And it's important for folks to let the elected officials and Community Board 12, which I also sit on, know that in addition to the restoration of the mansion, which we're all in support of, there's work that's required in the park. There are capital projects that are required in the park. And we want to see, funds and attention focused on them as well. And that's one of the things that folks can do to help ensure that in addition to the mansion, the park receives some TLC.
Great, thank you, Wayne. We have a little bit of advice from an anonymous woodworker who said measure twice and cut once. Thank you very much. Can you say a little bit more about when you expect the decision about the contractor?
So I think, sorry, I wasn't able to join earlier. My computer wasn't working, but I think Danielle probably mentioned that we're finalizing drawings and working with some general contractors in the coming weeks. So we would be hopeful that we would have, some information, some additional information in the coming month.
In the coming month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So very soon. And what is happening to the structural conditions and what was the result of the East Side investigation? I guess this is a question for you, Eric, that is, can you say a little bit more about what you found in terms of the level of deterioration with the structure? Like, could you give us some example maybe of what you found that was better than you thought and what you found that was worse than you thought?
Sure. I think a good example, that slide where we're showing the image of some deterioration that we suspected on the siding, and then we did some selective removals to sort of see what's going on behind the surface. That was an example where we were sort of pleasantly surprised that what's going on beneath the surface there, it seems to be still intact, and the wood beneath the shingles is still has integrity in that location. So that's an example of a cosmetic repair. We'll be replacing what you see on the surface, but the deterioration does not appear to have extended, beyond the surface in that location. Some of the images that you saw when we were, up in the roof framing, in the crawl spaces there, you can see some sort of water staining. The roof is a good example. Something that just needs to be replaced. It's beyond its useful life at this point, and what we've discovered, there's been a few leaks here and there, and what we've discovered, looking at the underside of the surface, is that that's going to be basically a wholesale replacement. That the roof just is going to be replaced in its entirety. So that's sort of the two opposite extremes of what we've discovered. We always try to look and spend a good deal of time identifying components that can be salvaged and restored, and then having sort of two categories, restoration and replication. And there's inevitably replication. There's portions that are deteriorated beyond repair, and that's why we do the wood species analysis, to make sure that we're doing a faithful replication.
I can attest to the need for that roof to get fixed. Our education office, we have to just make sure that nothing is under a certain area in a rainstorm. So we are very excited to get that roof replaced. So let me look and see. We have, will the railing that used to circle the roof be restored? Yes,
it's going to be replicated, to an identical fashion as the historic condition, including the historic wood species. Yeah.
What is the historic wood species, Eric? Just curious.
It's actually multiple. There's components of it that are cedar, and there's components that are oak. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Will the house still mostly have its original wood after the renovation? I think that means like once this restoration is done, do we have a 20% original, or what do we have left when we finish?
I don't know if we can calculate an exact percentage, but what I can say is that we always try to salvage as much historic fabric as we can, and only replace components that are beyond repair. So there will be a significant portion of the historic fabric that's going to be restored and not replaced. Yeah.
But in essence, we still have the original structure design. It's not changing in that way.
Right. And as far as the roof goes, that's not the original roof. The roof was replaced, probably several times in the lifespan of the mansion, over 260 years. So, we're going to replace the roof, in a sensitive manner, with materials that are identical to the historic condition. But things like that, it's not an original condition in its current state. So
Okay, great. Could you tell us a little bit more about the column replacement? That seems like a really big job. So those, could you say more? Actually, I would like to hear more about what you found when you took down the one column. So what did we learn from that? And how is that going to impact the redo of the columns?
Yeah, and Danielle, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything. But so when the first column was removed, it was actually very useful to us to understand how it was constructed and how previous repairs were made to it. So our team was able to get insight into how that's all assembled and how it was originally fabricated, which was very helpful in us, our decision-making process. And we conducted a subsequent investigation on the remaining columns. And that was that last slide we saw where they were doing that sort of forensic investigation. And essentially what they've determined is that the original sections of those columns still have some structural integrity, but the previous repairs that were made are where the weaknesses are. And that's primarily what you see at the base of the columns, where there's some deterioration there.
So those were what we have is the upper part is more original. The lower part has been restored with different wood.
Right. And
Okay.
and in a different, and it's a different type of construction than the original. Like the original was basically a hollowed out log. That was a structural in and of itself. The base of the columns, when it was repaired previously, it was done like a Cooper type of construction, like a barrel, with a structural support in the center. So there were two components to that repair that were done, and that's where the current weakness is at that location.
Yeah, I think if anyone's interested in sort of like what that looked like back in the 1990s restoration, they can check out the December parlor chat where I had some photos from that project that shows exactly what Eric is talking about.
Great, thank you. I think that's helpful to know. I was intrigued when we took that down to look inside and see that it was, there was no machine that did anything to that. It was all done by hand. It was really interesting to see. Perhaps we can have an exhibition at some point about the restoration. just a thought that we might be able to do. Okay, so we have another question. This is about the sash windows and the glass panes. Is the original 6/6 design, six lights over 6, or is that an original design to 1765?
Yeah, it did. You know, I can't speak to how many of the windows are actually original windows, but they are the original configuration. Yes.
And we will be we're going to be restoring any of those that, I mean, many of them are deteriorated.
There's only a handful that we're doing outright replacement. Most of them are to be restored. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, given life of woods now, would you want to consider a different species for the roof shingles? This person used cypress in their last redo, wondering if that would help, or Alaskan cedar is longer lasting. I think this would be a question for you and Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, cypress is a good material for some exterior wood components. But as far as the roof shingles go, they will be cedar to match the historic condition, and the specifications will dictate the type and grade of cedar, so that it's not only matching the historic condition, but gives us the most longevity for the lifespan of the roof. And we are also incorporating some more modern technologies in the actual assembly of the roof to make sure that it's ventilated properly and doesn't deteriorate as quickly as it would. Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. We have someone asking, will phase 1 be completed in time for the 250th anniversary of the United States independence in 2026? It seems that would be a great time to celebrate MJM's role in the Revolutionary War. I bet Meredith will take that one.
Sure. Well, we don't have an exact date of when the project will finish, but it will finish. Phase 1 will finish in sometime in 2026. So maybe we can plan some kind of a party.
Yeah, we'd be very, very close. That's awesome. Well, we are coming on 8 o'clock. We have answered the questions that have been submitted now on the Q&A. So if you are out there and you have a burning question, please do submit it right now so that we can answer it. I think the biggest challenge really for everybody is to share with you as much information as we can, as honestly as we can, so that you feel like you in the community are really knowledgeable and a part of what is happening. We don't want you to feel as though things are happening behind closed doors in whispers. This is a part of the community, and we want to be a good neighbor to everyone and share what is happening with the project. So we hope that this evening and our prior part 1 virtual parlor chat has gone to some extent to answer those questions and concerns. We do encourage you to share the recording with anyone that might not have been able to join us tonight. Again, that will be available on our website. You can have a link to our YouTube channel so that you can see it. But you can also just watch our social media. We update there all the time. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that we want to be able to give you as much information as we can. At this point, I want to ask if there are any final thoughts from our panelists before we end the evening, anyone raise your hand, let me know. Go ahead, Wayne.
I just want to sort of reiterate some of the points that you made. This restoration project is an involved city capital project, and there's a process that's involved there. In addition to that, given the age of the building, as I mentioned before, it's a challenging undertaking, and it will take time, and it will take time for us, the mansion, trustees and staff, as well as our stakeholders in the public, to actually see physical work underway. But there is just a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes that has to happen in order to get it right. And we are all working diligently to do that and make sure that, once we put the proverbial, shovel in the ground, that we are moving forward with a team of contractors that know what they're doing and that will handle this gem, this building that Duke Ellington called the jewel in the crown of Sugar Hill, the way it should be handled. And I also just want to remind everyone that our George Washington dinner is July 14th, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Well, on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. This has been very, very helpful, educational for me as the executive director, so that I can have a few more answers up my sleeve. And we hope that it has been beneficial to those who have joined us this evening. Again, please go to our website, morrisjumel.org, to find out more information. Reach out to us, ask us anything, and we will look forward to seeing you at the July 14th George Washington dinner, as well as coming in and checking out what is happening at the mansion on any given weekend. All right. Thank you all very, very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.